Moko, for our people, was the way of saying I'm here and I'm beautiful.
Koina te taonga I mahue mai a tātou mātua tipuna ki a tātou. E rangi kei roto I te toto a te Māori.
Moko is really an opportunity to sew back into your skin the things that are actually important to you.
E tohu tērā mo te whakapapa me te kaupapa o te tangata. Ngā tangata katoa ka whai whakapapa, o te mahanga no ngā tangata ka whai kaupapa.
Moko to me is exciting because we can bring back and restore something of our culture that was almost lost. I look at the faces of our ancestors in photographs and paintings, and I'm still in awe of what I see.
Look across the world at all First Nations peoples, they do that in one way or another.
In Hawaii, they call it kako. In Samoa, they call it tato. In other islands, there's variations of that similar sounding word. But here in Aotearoa, we call it moko.
Kiau nei I moia tahia I tēnei āhuatanga o te moko I roto I te moa nanu I aki.
Tame Iti and the Cook Islands, everything revolves around the sea. When we get to Aotearoa, Tāne-mahuta, the forest, plays an important role.
When our people first arrived here in Aotearoa, because we were so isolated in the furthest south of the Pacific, the art form itself actually started to evolve.
Ka hai tia te whenua, ka hai tia no hoki te kiri o te tangata.
E mi ana ki o tātou tuakana, o roto o hāmo o Tahiti, Raiatea, e rā whenua katoa Hawaii, e mau nei I ngā tohua o tātou mātua tipuna. Hoi anō, kiau nei I ahu mai te kupu moko I te haitanga o te whenua tō tātou atua tipua, a Ruaumoko ake. E hoki ana ki ngā paki waitara a Mataora Rarohenga and Niwareka. E hoki ana ki te ao Rarohenga, ki te ao wairua, ki te wāhi I poi ai te mauri o Ruaumoko.
He rereke, he nui anō hoki ngā kōrero mo te orokohanga o te moko. Tērā pēr, ko te whakawhaia I potanga o Mataora Rarohenga and Niwareka te kōrero e mōhi o whānui tiana. No te ao wairua, no Rarohenga and Niwareka. No te ao tūroa a Mataora. Nā te pūhaehaetanga o Mataora, ka patua e ia a Niwareka. Ko te hokinga tērā ona ki Rarohenga. He tino pauri no Mataora ka heke atu ia ki Rarohenga, ki te rapu I tōna wahine, kia riro mai anō ia tōna ngākau. He mea peita tōna moko ki te ngārahu, hei whakapūrotu ia anō. Ka riria Mataora e te iwi o Niwareka. He whakawhiu kētā rātau ia Mataora I whakawhiwhi ai ki te moko. Ko te whainga kētanga ko te matenga o Mataora o te patunga o Niwareka. Ki tonu ana Mataora I te hina pauri I te kōrehu. Nā te matua o Niwareka, nā uetonga te moko o Mataora I whakatūturu ai, he mea tā ki te uhi. Nā waira, kātahi ka hono anō a Niwareka rāua ko Mataora. Ka hoki rāua ki te Aotearoa me te taonga nei, me te Moko. He rereke tā tēnā iwi, mo te orokohanga o tēnei mea, o te Moko.
Koe te kōrero i rono hau ki te āhuatana o te Moko nei. Koe nei te kanohi o tāne. Ko tāna mata, ko tāna kanohi. E rere ana ko te manu tērā pātare ana ki te huarahi. Koe ra te kōrero i a tūhoe ko te tīpana. Ira atua he ira tanata. We rā kōrero, ara atu pēr te tino pānui o tērā o e rā kōrero.
Ki roto i oku ake whakaaro, te wāhanga e mau nei i te wairu o tērā whare i ro katoa atu i a Niwareka. Te wāhanga i riru i a Mataora ko te mahi anake.
So we have the narratives around Mataora and Niwareka, and for me, they lay a whole lot of other value systems down.
The need to take care of our taonga, our wahine. You know, it was Niwareka and her family that gave the gift to Mataora.
I hara mai katoa ngā wāhine ki te whakaora i te kānohi o Mataora. I hara ko te tāne. Nō reira, nā te aroha o ngā kui o te rao Rarohenga i ora e Mataora. Ko te tohu e aku titero ki aku titero, ko te tohu e mau nei i taku kānohi, he tohu whakama. Ka ki mai etahi, he tohu rangatira, engari e mōhio ana hau, he tohu whakama, he tohu whakaiti. Kia noho au ki tēnā puna o te aloha, ki tai kia Niwareka.
There's been a lot that actually has been lost. We have to sift through all this information that is left and find the truth in it.
Raitiana o te ture me te hoko pū. Koe ranga take i kino te ngaro o te Moko i waingana i a tātou.
Ko pākea ke te o tātou āhuatani. Nā te mea kua hohou ke te pākea tani i roto i te nākau o te tanata. I tērā ki te takahi te āhuatana o a tātou mea taonga tuku iho.
The decline in Moko is like the rest of Polynesia, you know, the colonisation, the missionary influence.
Christianity had a huge part to play in the decimation of Moko, and in some ways still does.
Ko tō rātou kauhau ki te iwi, me kore e mau anō i te Moko.
We were taught and indoctrinated to believe that our carvings on our meeting houses were ungodly, were things that we should no longer have in our presence. I do think some of that fear remains. I think we're still unpicking, undoing many, many layers of being told that skin carving isn't right.
One of the last tipono in our family that wore full-face moko, he was exceptional because not only did he have full-face moko and a very good one, but he hadn't been beheaded and exported. Because that's what was happening to a lot of people with moko.
Māori preserved the heads of the dead. It was part of our culture. It had always been part of our culture, where one, you preserve the head of a loved one in order to mourn and cherish over them. And the other was you preserve the head of an enemy in order to revile and ridicule them. They weren't being traded between iwi here and Aotearoa. They were being traded from here out into overseas. They started with Cook, That was when the first trade for an upoko occurred.
And then when the museums wanted one, then it became a fashionable thing for people to have them on their mantelpieces. People don't realise just how many there are. The export was in their thousands.
The trade of mōkai was actually driven by the desire from Europeans, British, Americans, Russians to obtain heads of Māori, particularly by the fact that they were tattooed. So that was their main interest. With the arrival of Europeans and the discovery of the musket, the northern tribes who obtained those muskets first, and so then they would travel to the North Island on raids. Māori soon figured out that we can't beat the musket with our weapons, so we need to get muskets ourselves. You know, there was that urgency to obtain them at any means necessary.
One mōkai could be made in a matter of days, and that would be the equivalent to two muskets and ammunition.
I etahi wā tunu ka tīmata e rao ngā iwi e whawhai ana, ki te kimi haere I ngā rangatira e mau moko ana, mau Mataora ana, I te patu I a rātou, I te poro o rātou kaki, te me te hoko anō hoki o rātou upoko, ai hoko pū.
An art form that was all about reverence and about people attaining a higher state, and was the most tapu thing we could do to each other, suddenly became debased. Heads became worth money. Even to this day, we're still trying to deal with the echoes of the thousands of people that were beheaded and preserved in the name of musket warfare.
Nā reira, ko tērā tunu o ngā mai, ka ahua mataku tunu te tangata kia tāngi ai tōna kanohi ki te moko Mataora, mea ka haro mai te tai tangata ki te poroto kaki. Nā reira, ka ahua ngaro I reira te Mataora.
The Tohunga Suppression Act was introduced and promoted by the 4 Māori members of Parliament in their day. And what people really need to understand is that it was important and it was also oppressive. But it was nothing whatsoever to do with moko as a practice. It had everything to do with a political agenda in Māori communities. That decline of the art form came about from people migrating in their thousands from the remote areas of Aotearoa and into the cities, where we were coming to work in another iwi's territory. But in those communities from which the urban workers came, there was still wahine maumoko. The old ladies were still there. People become so much engaged with the idea of oppression and victimhood that they don't really see, and what we continued to achieve despite stuff like that. During the extraordinary years of Tame Poata, he and other practitioners, but particularly Tame, was actually inscribing the faces of women all over the Eastern Bay of Plenty and Waikato and the East Coast. He was doing up to as many as 20 over a weekend. He was doing that work without interruption, without government sanction during the period of the TSA.
Ko tērā ko hoki ko tōku tipuna a Tame Poata, ko tētahi atu ko wero, ko tētahi atu ko heroini. Nā reira ka whai haere hoki ne mātou o e nei rā i wā rātou tohu. Ngā pito kōrero i mahu e tonu mai i a rātou.
I harau te pātai e tahi o nā korau ane. Pehau o whakaaro kia mo te maumoko. Ka ki mai te kau mātua ia, wairotia. Ana sau. Hea hai, pēnā koina te kōrero, no rea kaua tātou e pātere, kaua tātou e haka, kaua te mō teata. Hoa, e oriti te rao.
I tohe mai ngā iwi mō tēnei hokitanga mai o te moko ki wanganu i a tātou.
We had our fair share of naysayers, but as much negativity we had about bringing moko back, we had twice as much positivity in terms of, yes, do it.
There has never been a time ever in the Māori world when there was not a marked female face carrying the Kauae moko. It never vanished. It's still here. We're still here.
If it had not been for their courage and if it had not been for their fortitude, their mana to sort of carry on receiving the moko Kauae, we may have gotten to a point where the art form itself may have been lost.
You know, have an enduring love and respect for them, you know, just because, well, it wasn't an easy journey. You know, some of them were quite devout Christians, but what I loved about them, man, is they were staunch.
The tattooist is worthless without the clients, without the person willing to lay down on the table and take it. The tattooist is nothing. So the backbones of moko, in my opinion, has always been our women.
It was largely women in the initial years of reclamation of moko kanohi who took that reclamation on.
You didn't see any men really feature in that revival period of the 1920s, let's say.
For the Mataora and the male facial, they definitely had a complete sever. But the women and the Kauae carried on.
I kite au ia rānu, ia hau rānu e nuhi anu. Pake ki hia mai roto uātoki. Kure au ia nāpera. Mataora, e hai koe moko hiai. O nā korau o kui e te kōrero. Nā te mei hara mai te korau a Tame Poata ki kone i uātoki.
Ko Tame Poata te ringaringa nāna i tā i te Kauae o taku tipuna kuia. Āhua te kaumārima pēr te pakeke, te kaumaono pēr te pakeke.
Tame Poata ki au e korau i tāo taku kōka. Taku rongo, nā waku kuia o te teko i kōrua. Nā, me ki e kōtiro tonu ara, kaumaona. E pāle ki Mera Moko, e pērā kei te tapu. Ala ka tau mai, te taonga, me tala hoa, te ao kapurangi. O Tame Poata tonu i aia nā karakia, nā ko te ao kapurangi o ki me te nā karaki. E waiata ki ne, e pāle ki Mera Moko, e pērā kei te tapu. Ka kore he karakia ka te, e tiki pene lohona tui atua iki. Naka mea koe te mea tuata hera hara, kai re rātau e mea. E wini ana, nā kui ana, e tiro rei te mea, ana e rere rongi nā toto, ana te mamai, ana ko te mahi a te ao kapurangi, e whakanāwari atu.
I did the very first auhi, which is chiseled in, and that tamping, which is really painful.
A tohunga called Hokotahi drew my pattern. Then I lay down. Another tohunga, Taiwera, tapped the chisel into my chin and made the blood run.
Ko te uhi. Pēnei te matakani.
This chisel had jagged edges like a saw.
Weno, herea ki te rākau.
It was tied to a bent stick.
Ko pēnei. Ana ka te ka. Ka mai ka. Ka mai ke pakari te toto i te tuatai.
The blood was wiped away.
Ka tia reira, ka horoi ngā tota. Ka mitu.
The pigment was pressed into the cuts. It took from morning to evening.
Ka o ti taku mō. Ka tauna hea.
When my moko was finished, they lit a fire.
Tauna hea. Ka tiki na he rau rākau.
They fetched leaves and warmed them over the fire before applying them to my moko.
My great-grandfather, Takurua Tamarau, he sent my grandmother, Kararoina, to receive her Kauae from Tame Poata. When she arrived up there and she saw, you know, the moss was all bloody and the cries and the pain, and she decided that it wasn't for her, that she wasn't going to have it done. So when she went back to Ruatoki, my great-grandfather was not happy with her. He wanted her to do the karanga. The sad part about that was he actually gave the right to karanga to another family.
We had different types of process. The most common was achieved by using uhi or chisels. But with Māori, there was also certain stones so that the blade itself was like a scalpel, and that sliced and penetrated so that the process looks like scarification, and it is scarification. And it was that process that was so different from Samoa, Hawaii, Tahiti, and Southeast Asia.
You know, the chiselling of the face, that is our distinction in Polynesia, really. You know, that's what makes people so fascinated by the idea that people are carving the face.
You know, in the pursuit of uhi work, making any incision, and especially the type of incision that uhi make, doesn't take much for things to not go right. So it was pretty gratuitous, you know, they were deep. When you look at our tupuna, you know, posts heal, even those incisions are still 3 to 4 mil deep then. That's a serious operation. And what we do know is that people died.
In the late 18th century, Cook and his mates turned up and they brought metal that transformed the face of Māori on the realisation that the sharpness could be maintained in a way that you couldn't get with stone and bone. As a chief aged, it was important to maintain one's glamour and gravitas. That meant you had your skin reopened. You did it again and again and again. And I think, my God, they must have been brave.